They are still talking about, they're open to other plans. Chewy, I wonder if that scary thought you had last night about Fox NZ, because I guess that means they've got the infrastructure all in place, including the staff, for another five months. So if someone did want to swoop in and buy it all off them, I wonder if that's why they announce it this far out, to basically go, we're closing down, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Anybody out there?
Fire sale, staff
fire
and
sale.
Equipment.
Yeah, going dirt cheap. There's a few things to talk about here, including having a look at the AM show this morning, talking to Willie Jackson. But let's start with the One News story, because there is a flow on from the money issues. Part of the flow on is what's happening with things like the block. Questions around that. If they go down to a skeleton staff, which will mostly be salespeople.
Not the block as well.
I know. But a very embarrassing thing came out today about the Communications and Broadcast Minister, Melissa Lee. She doesn't know what Newshub does. So she made a comment yesterday that literally can't work because it's an entity that Newshub provides news to, and Newshub will no longer exist. It'll be made out very, very clear as we watch the story.
Uncertainty and turmoil are increasing after yesterday's shock proposal to axe news production and hundreds of jobs at TV3. There's also unease over what it might mean for other well-known Kiwi programs and our next generation of broadcasters. Kim Baker-Wilson has today's developments.
It's the day after for Newshub's viewers and its staff.
You've likely seen the news by now that our company has proposed to shut down Newshub from June.
Look, I'm just going to say, how harsh is this? Do you see the time? It's 5:58. This is the very first thing they say on the show this morning. Imagine starting your show and already having this much emotion. So 5:58 a.m. this morning, this is how they open the show. Not a criticism, just saying, imagine how hard it was if you started a show, then had 3 hours to do, and this was the emotion at the beginning of the show.
Newshub from June. Some people have been asking, does that affect AM too? And AM and Newshub are one and the same. We're all part of the same family.
A family where about 300 jobs are set to go.
Thank you.
Sparking fears from those at the start of their careers.
See what happens and pray for the best.
Fears over upheaval beyond the newsroom.
It was a shock and a really dark day for New Zealand broadcasting.
And fears for the entire sector.
I was expecting cutbacks, not a complete demolition.
What's set to be taken off the air, leaving the much wider sector up in the air.
The likes of the Block and the Traitors and Married at First Sight New Zealand, they're all at risk and at jeopardy because...
You okay about that, Joey?
I actually really like the Traitors.
I don't know what it is.
I demolished all available seasons of the Traitors with my wife, the British, the Australian, and the New Zealand, basically the space of 2 weeks.
The thing that's interesting as well, what they're talking about is the opportunities for young people. Now, I came up in radio. I was like the last person hired in New Zealand radio without a communications degree. Like most people, unless you're like a Mark Richardson, who they just, for some reason, he's had a charmed life that they just throw everything at. I was like the last person when I started working at More FM in Auckland. And even the hosts at More FM in Auckland were like, how did you get this job? I went, I just kind of talked to the boss, and in the meeting, 10-minute meeting, he said, why don't you start working with us? We'll just train you up. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like fun. But really everyone like Chewy after me went through a comms degree, a communication degree to sort of get in. So there's been these kind of chunks of time, like let's say back in the 80s, and radio in particular, same as TV though. There used to be a show called, I remember it from Auckland because I was a little kid, called Top Half. So after the 6 o'clock news at 6:30, it broke regionally, and there was like a news program out of Wellington that did the bottom half of the North Island. There's one out of Christchurch, I think, that did the South Island, or maybe just half of the South Island. And there's one in Auckland called Top Half, which is where Judy Bailey and John Hawkesby started off. And that was when everything was localised. Radio localised everywhere, 1ZB, 2ZB, 3ZB, 4ZB. Everything was localised. And then in the 90s, the radio went through this kind of transition where they started to network. And so 1ZB, 2ZB, 3ZB, 4ZB became News Talk ZB, and basically got all driven out of Auckland. And that's when I kind of came into radio, right, where they had the networks going on. And then COVID hit, and a whole bunch of those classic hits breakfast shows got taken away, and they brought Wellington in, and they brought Auckland in. And so there's been another stage. Now, this is sort of the fourth stage of it, where they're going, actually, we can't afford to do anything locally, even if it's nationwide. And communications degrees have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. Like, so when I kind of started in radio, 2000-ish, there was only just starting, and now it's massive. But that's what you do if you want to do broadcast. You go in, you become an intern for TV3, and then you become a journalist, and then you become this, and you go on the overnight news desk, and these are positions. So this is going to really impact the next generation of journalists, because TV3, Newshub, has 300 staff. You think about how many comm students you went through with, Chewy. It's 300 people. The 300 opportunities now gone from there.
Well,
so it's just fascinating.
I mean, I was talking about the fact that I studied with Samantha Hayes last night. Now, her pathway is she studied journalism.
Yeah.
And as part of her journalism course, got to go up to TV3 for a couple of weeks to kind of intern a coffee run and that sort of thing. And she got her big break because their music reviewer, it may have even been Dave Ferrier, was sick and couldn't interview, I want to say Megadeth, but it was a touring metal band and nobody knew anything about them. And the guy that was off sick, he'd done all the research. It just so happens that Samantha Hayes was a big fan. So she just went very quietly for the back of the room going, I could do it. And that was her big break on Nightline, was interviewing this band and doing a really good job. So this is the thing, is like, when I came up through radio, it was a combination of it's who you know and what you stick your hand up for, but and a bit of an education. But I know the course that I went on, I chose because it was more hands-on. The other choice in the South Island was the New Zealand Broadcasting School, which was a more formal, theory-based degree structure. But yeah, imagine being the guys in that study line going, I want to be a broadcast journalist.
Yeah.
I want to be in front of a camera, or I want to be supporting someone in front of a camera, just to see half of your industry explode in front of you. And you'd be going, oh, fuck. Because now, you're all primed for the New Zealand market. Do you have the mustard to cut it overseas? Do you look at bailing on New Zealand? It is devastating. There's such a flow-on effect. Like I talk about the traitors. I obviously know a lot of New Zealand comedians. They're often writers for those panel shows.
Yep.
And TV3 did most of those.
Yep, 7 days.
So they were the 7 days and the project and all of those guys, those panel shows had comedians as writers, comedians as regular guests, that sort of thing. For those guys, that's a paycheck. As one of the only consistent paychecks in comedy is to get a TV gig.
Yep.
So that's exploded. That's gone. Yeah. Fuck it, the block, take it or leave it. But there's still people that work for it, and I still have sympathy for that. The show format as a whole is a rolling advert, and that's the thing. They're cheap to make because it's an advertisement. And this is the thing: it's those sort of shows that might fund things like the news program, which is incredibly expensive and makes no fucking money.
Yep.
So, yeah, my worry is, as the channel carries on, it is going to be low quality, cheap to make, licensed American stuff or licensed overseas stuff, and the benefits for local actors, stage crew, camera people, comedians, that sort of thing, just dries up. And if it dries up, then they go somewhere else and we lose them forever. And when our film industry has got so much steam going, can we lose more people?
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. I also just noticed a comment here from the technician. Says media broadcasting students most likely head overseas now. Well, the problem is this is not a New Zealand only issue. I mean, this is a worldwide issue. And, I talked a bit last night about not all media platforms are dwindling. Some are growing. And I talked about us. Like we're chicken feed in the world of media when it comes to numbers. But I did the numbers today. I was just interested, so I thought I'd have a look. Chewy, the week that's just gone, right? 19th to 23rd of February, yeah? YouTube only, because we don't include TikTok or Twitter, because I wasn't doing that back there, because they would make it exponentially bigger. But YouTube only, last week, we got 44,000 views. Have a guess the exact same week a year ago what we got total. This is all videos on YouTube.
Maybe 10,000?
2,400.
Jesus.
So 12 months ago, all clips, all everything on YouTube in the same week, 2,400. 12 months before that, 2022, 942. So you can see that some mediums are dying and others are not. We've gone in the last year for that exact same week from 950 to 2,400 to 44,000 in exactly the same week, only on YouTube. Now, I know lots of places out there get 44,000 views on one video. But you know, what I'm saying is you can see growth in some areas. And whilst what we're seeing overseas, back to the comment from the technician, is like broadcast media is dying everywhere. But what is happening better overseas is some people are using this sort of medium and new media. I kind of call it new media because it was new media about 10 years ago. And now they're sort of new media. It's not necessarily new media. It's this new media used in a different way. So I think that there won't necessarily be the opportunity for them to go off overseas. And probably what we need to see is, and we've been talking about this for a long time. This has been freeze frame for a very long time, hasn't it? We've been talking about this for a long time. And one of the issues with what we're doing is you need to actually educate the advertising market how this is a good place to put your dollar. And now with things like Newshub and that, I'm sadly, you know, I had conversations with some of the people you see on the posters today on my Twitter feed, and it's really sad for all of them. Not on my Twitter feed, sorry, on my phone. Doesn't matter. But there's going to be money floating around to put towards other things. You know, maybe this will be maybe as kind of pirate-ish as it sounds. Me hearties. Maybe the demise of a big thing like that will lead to an increase for something else that's more independent like this. I'm not saying, yay, maybe we'll succeed off their failings, but maybe it will. Maybe those advertisers now are going to have a look around. Maybe the advertising market's going to have to be re-educated, and the mainstream media in New Zealand have not done that. TVNZ hasn't done that. None of the radio stations have done that. You know, Newshub, TV3 haven't done that. They haven't done it right yet. They just really haven't done it right.
Yeah, it takes my mind back to a thought that I had when I was in broadcasting, and I had come out of one of the big networks, More FM and The Edge and all of those guys. And I'd realised that sort of format of broadcasting wasn't for me. And a bunch of my course mates had bailed out of the industry at that same time, and we just decided to set up essentially a little low-power pirate station. And at that time, I remember thinking, this is the way forward. Like,
yeah,
everything's condensed down to Auckland and networked out. Then the response is go small, go local.
Yeah, hyper-local.
And, yeah, hyper-local. And essentially, that's what we're doing with news commentary.
Yeah.
Zero budget, super niche. You know, and that's the way we're doing it. And it seems to be working, and people seem to like it. Which is great, but there has to be a middle ground. We've spoken to some of the big guys and gone, do you realize for your petty cash funds, you could have us, you could take us to a bigger audience, whatever. And everybody goes, oh, that sounds great. You're doing great. You guys are doing great work. It's so important. Anyway, got no money. Bye. And it's frustrating. You know, there has to be a middle ground. You can have some really cheap, really good content, or you can spunk a whole bunch of money up against the wall. But yeah, there's an answer there, and it just feels like nobody's found it yet.
Yeah, and look, we said last night that the minimum Newshub salary cap would be $30 million a year. I reckon, Chewy, we'd happily work with someone for, I reckon, $1 million each. You think that'd be all right?
Oh, I could probably stoop to that.
Yeah.
So there you go. My stride for that.
There's the office. There's the offer.
Next
Warner
move.
Brothers Discovery. We'll do it for $1 million each. You know something that's really funny about that? I actually produce about as much content each week as probably 8 to 10 journalists. I do about 70 pieces of content a week. So That's what I'm saying. There's a new way of doing this. There's a different way of doing this, and they don't get it. And the podcasts that you hear from radio stations, they don't get it. And some people are mentioning some names in the chat. I can see some of those going past, like Brian Tyler Cohen, is that his name? And, you know, and a bunch of the American ones. Yeah, that's the model. That's the model we're basing ours on. It's the same for student radio network. Great content, and talent, no dollars. Yeah. All right. Yeah. We should probably, I don't know how we went down that path. We should probably keep going on that story. Let's keep going. With Mr. Schusterman.
Basically, you have to go to the funding agencies now to bring in the money. They can't pay for them.
Part of the problem, he says, out of date legislation.
The time is up now for the government to stop kicking the can down the road and actually start making some decisions about the future of the production industry and the media industry in New Zealand, because we're out of time.
New Zealand On Air says it started fresh talks with Warner Brothers Discovery. There's $30 million set aside for content yet to make it on screen. TV3 had humble beginnings. Several decades of news making.
This is 3 News.
And news breaking. One of its longest serving reporters not expecting the complete cull.
Probably cut back on the news, like maybe turn it into a half-hour show. Maybe drop it at the weekends.
He teaches the...
Look, sorry, dude, that actually wouldn't save that much money. No. I mean, that's like going, I can drive 500 Ks and stop, or I can get all the way to 700 Ks down the road. Like turning it from an hour to a half hour, like all the same people still have to, it's not going to make that much difference, even though you're apparently a broadcasting educator these days.
Up and comers of a fragile career.
There are fewer jobs. However, sometimes with this sort of thing, opportunities can arise.
Exactly what his students are hoping for.
It's kind of gutting to hear that news on an industry you kind of want to go into.
It creates a really scary scenario for us new ones.
And ripping out such a huge part of it gets a bit nerve-wracking.
It's scary, but I'm staying optimistic for sure.
That's what Newshub staff are having to be as well.
It's been pretty tough, but we'll get through it.
Through until June, when the studio lights are switched off. Kim Baker-Wilson, 1 News.
Meanwhile, media and communication.
Yep.
Imagine working in a place that you know the walls are falling down in a couple of months.
Well, but the other thing is, I won't say who it is. But like I said, someone that's on, I've been speaking to people today because I know them, who are on the posters, and this is what one of them said to me. I'm not going to say who it is, and I'll just make sure I'm not going to identify anything. I'll just say that this person said, I didn't see it coming, but I'm doing okay. That's all I'll read from that message. Yeah. So they had no idea. Like they had no idea. So that meeting, I mean, I've been in those meetings before, never with an entertainment medium. When I was working selling computers back when I was a student, so we all got called and got asked to stay on Friday night after work and got told that they were bankrupt and the shop wouldn't be open on Monday morning. I've never seen it in the radio, but when you get those kind of all hands on deck, everyone here now for an important meeting, it's never good news. They're never like, oh, by the way, everyone gets 20% pay rise. It's always bad news. But yeah, for the next few months is going to be interesting. I do wonder again if it's simply because they can now see if someone else wants to take it over, you know? I mean, as you're saying, it would be a fire sale. It would be a bit like Stuff, wouldn't it? I mean, remember they bought Stuff for $1 to keep it going. That'd be the situation. It'd be a bit like that, you know? So just offloading the tens of millions of dollars of debt for nothing, but leaving all the infrastructure. So, but we'll see. I don't know.
I think the thing that stunned me as well as the reaction and the fallout to this is how the government it seems to have no realization what this does for the political landscape of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Like absolutely no concept of it. Melissa Lee's comments are just the most tone deaf things I've ever seen. Yeah, just bizarre that they don't realize what a hole this is going to leave. And fills a vacuum.
And also fucking Winston Peters talking about this is a disaster for democracy. I'm not saying it's Winston Peters' fault this has happened, but any of those comments that we've all seen online, which is like, aha, go woke, go broke, aha, they were the ones that were they were basically pushing the jab information and all. They're all his voters.
It's his crowd.
Yeah, that's his crowd. He has fomented this disdain by calling them the woke media and by the way he treats them in the hallway and basically calls them all liars. And it's not his fault this has happened, but he has got blood on his hands to an element that contributed towards the kind of reason that only 42% of people trust the news media. He's one of the reasons that only 42% of New Zealanders trust the news media, because of the bullshit he goes. And then he has the fucking nerve to be talking about, it's a disaster for democracy. Maybe you should think about that before you actually poison the well of people understanding what the news media is actually there for, because that's what he's done. So he can fuck off as well.
Well, it also means that TVNZ is standing all the way out on their own. So for anyone that, say, reckons the government should have nothing to do with public journalism.
Well, I actually also, believe it or not, I think for the first time in my life, watched a Mike's Minute from News Talk ZB this morning because it came up on my algorithm.
Jesus Christ, are you okay?
And I had to have a lie down afterwards and a cup of tea. But he did say something, which I'm not saying is right, but it's interesting. And that is, when you have no one pushing you or no competition, complacency can come. So the other thing that's concerning for TVNZ from us is that, they've got no competition. They've got no competition now.
Did you just make me agree with Mike Hoskins?
That was my plan for tonight.
Fuck.
That was my plan for tonight. And I'll say it again. We've been saying this for a year, 18 months, maybe 2 years, when they started talking about, combining news, TVNZ and RNZ, is TV1 should go ad-free, non-commercial, and TV2 should be commercial. And if they had have done that a year ago, then the advertising spend could have been getting split between TV2 and TV3, right? But I think they should still do that, because I think that the other lesson in this is news is not profitable, but it's an essential thing for us to have in a democracy. So the BBCs of the world, the ABCs of the world, the TVNZs of the world, publicly funded broadcasters are essential. And let's have this conversation around them being the woke media. Like we said last night, no one ever says go woke, go broke about Taylor Swift, because it's a nonsense saying, absolutely nonsense. But it's just shown again how important it is to have a publicly funded, secure news media agency that doesn't have to reach for the clicks or the eyeballs, right? That's why Newshub failed. They didn't have enough eyeballs to pay for what they needed to do it. That's exactly what it is. So we have to have a group, a publicly funded group, that ignores the eyeballs. It doesn't matter, that just does the news. And that's why they're essential.